It was a peaceful Thursday morning in Bethesda, Maryland, as Officer Frank Anderson began his routine patrol. With 15 years of law enforcement under his belt, Frank had seen it all, yet, over the years, the sense of pride he once carried had given way to frustration and monotony. Among his colleagues, Frank had developed a reputation for making quick judgments, a skill he considered essential to the job but one that others viewed as a liability. As Frank cruised along, half-tuned into the chatter on his police radio, a sleek black SUV zipped past him, well above the speed limit. Without hesitation, Frank flicked on his siren and signaled the driver to pull over. Approaching the driver's side window, he found himself face-to-face with a composed black man in his mid-40s. The man greeted him with a polite "Good morning, officer," but Frank didn't respond. "License and registration," Frank demanded curtly. The driver, whose name was George, complied without protest. George was a professional chauffeur with over a decade of experience behind the wheel. "Do you know why I stopped you?" Frank asked while inspecting the documents. "No, officer," George replied calmly. "You were speeding," Frank claimed. George maintained his composure. "I don't believe I was, sir." Frank's tone hardened. "Are you arguing with me?" "Not at all, officer. I've been mindful of the speed limit," George replied, his voice steady but respectful. Unmoved by George's politeness, Frank ordered him out of the car. George hesitated but complied, stepping onto the shoulder of the road. As Frank began questioning him more aggressively, he failed to notice the quiet figure sitting in the back seat of the SUV. That figure was none other than Donald Trump. Opting for a discreet ride to his favorite golf course, Trump had chosen to forego the usual motorcade and media attention. The peaceful journey, however, had taken an unexpected turn. As Frank's interrogation of George continued, the SUV's rear window lowered, revealing Trump's unmistakable face. "Is there an issue here?" Trump asked, his voice calm but authoritative. Frank froze, his mind racing as the realization of who he had just pulled over sank in. Words failed him as he stared at Trump in shock. Trump leaned forward slightly, his tone firm. "I asked, is there a problem?" "No, sir," Frank stammered, instinctively stepping back. "Good," Trump replied, his gaze unwavering. "Then perhaps you'd like to explain why you stopped my driver." Frank struggled to form a coherent response, his authority unraveling. Meanwhile, George stood silently, his dignity intact. Trump's sharp, measured words cut through the tension. "You stopped this man not because he did anything wrong, but because of an assumption. That's not how things work, not in my America." Frank's grip tightened on his belt, but he remained silent. Trump concluded, "You're going to let George get back in the car, and you're going to leave us alone. Do you understand?" Frank nodded stiffly, unable to meet Trump's gaze. George returned to the driver's seat, and the SUV pulled away, leaving Frank standing on the roadside, humiliated. Little did he know, his ordeal was far from over. Back at the precinct, Frank attempted to brush off the encounter, convincing himself it would amount to nothing. After all, what were the odds that Trump riding in an unmarked vehicle would spark further consequences? However, as he stepped into the station, an uneasy silence greeted him. Colleagues avoided his eyes, and whispered conversations filled the room. Before Frank could settle at his desk, Captain Roberts summoned him to the office. "Sit down," Roberts said sharply, sliding a tablet across the desk. On the screen was a video that had already gone viral. A passing driver had recorded the entire exchange, capturing Trump's scathing remarks. The audio was crystal clear, and the accusations of harassment were impossible to ignore. "This," Roberts said, pointing to the screen, "is a national embarrassment." Frank attempted to defend himself. "Captain, I didn't know he was." Roberts cut him off. "That's exactly the point, Anderson. It shouldn't matter who he was. You profiled an innocent man, and now the entire country knows about it." Despite his protests, Frank was handed a suspension notice. "Turn in your badge and gun," Roberts said coldly, effective immediately. As Frank left the office, he could feel the weight of every gaze in the precinct. His career, once a source of pride, was crumbling before his eyes. Meanwhile, at his Mar-a-Lago residence, Trump was on the phone with the police commissioner. His tone was calm but resolute. "This isn't about me," Trump said. "It's about the principle. That officer acted on prejudice, and that's unacceptable. I expect action." The commissioner assured Trump that the matter would be addressed. But Trump wasn't satisfied with vague promises. Determined to see justice served, he directed his legal team to file a formal complaint against Frank Anderson for abuse of authority and discrimination. The media quickly picked up the story, igniting nationwide outrage. The hashtag Justice for George began trending, with millions condemning Frank's actions. An internal investigation soon revealed a troubling history of complaints about Frank's behavior on duty. George, now thrust into the spotlight, handled the situation with poise. In a televised interview, he reflected on the incident. "I'm not angry," he said. "I'm just disappointed. Officers like Frank make it harder for hard-working people like me to do our jobs without fear." His dignified response resonated with viewers across the nation. Trump himself called George to commend his professionalism. "You showed more grace than most would," Trump said. "I respect that." As the investigation concluded, Frank was officially dismissed from the police force. The precinct issued a public apology and pledged to implement new training programs aimed at addressing racial bias. Meanwhile, George received an outpouring of support from across the country. As a gesture of goodwill, Trump invited him to a round of golf, praising his integrity. This incident became a powerful reminder of the importance of accountability and respect. It illustrated how one moment of injustice could spark meaningful change and highlighted the resilience of those who rise above adversity. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell for more compelling stories. Have a wonderful day.